Hey ladies, welcome to episode 58. We are in part 3 of my 4-part series on marriage. I am really excited to dive into this episode and talk about what happens when you disagree on parenting. I'm going to take a couple different angles here. Before we dive in, though, you may have seen on Instagram that I made an announcement for the end of 2020. I am doing something that I've never done before. I am not taking any more 90-day clients. The reason being, I have surgery scheduled in December, and I want to be able always to show up for my clients 110%. Like, I give everything to my one-on-one clients. And to be able to do that, what I've done is created a 4-week program. Yep, just 4 weeks focused on intuitive eating. Week 1, identify food rules and the food police. Week 2, increase awareness around hunger, fullness, and satisfaction. And let me tell you, there's a difference between those. Week 3 is we'll talk about integrating mindful movement. In week 4, we'll talk about intuitive eating with gentle nutrition. If this is something you are interested in, do not wait. I am only taking 5 clients for this 4-week program. It will be for the month of November, skipping the week of Thanksgiving here in the States. I say that because I do have Canadians who listen to the podcast, and they already had their Thanksgiving in October. So if you want in, there is a special email below. Please email me right away. Say, I want to be one of those clients. This 4-week program is priced at $397. Like I said, I've never done this before. I cannot say I would do this again, but I want to make sure those who are wanting to be in the holiday season, end the year with this knowledge, with this really powerful work of intuitive eating, this is the program for you. All right, we should dive in though to this episode on parenting. Let's go.
Welcome to the Health, Life, and More for Women podcast with certified life coach, mom of 4, and just all-around lover of all things 80s, your host, Jennifer D'Amato. Buckle in. Let's get started.
So like I said, I want to talk about this issue of disagreeing on parenting from a couple different angles. If you listened to episode 57 where I talked about arguing, I said it all. Like, you all know that this was an area in my marriage where I failed continuously. Now, that wasn't to say, my husband was perfect at arguing. I mean, can you be perfect at arguing? Do you want to be? I don't know. Anyway, I always promise to be authentic and real on this podcast. And if you haven't listened to episode 57, where I basically tell you I was a huge problem when it came to arguing, I would highly recommend listening to that. I'm just really here to add on to it today, because when it comes to parenting, you're 2 different people, and very likely you're going to have 2 different opinions about different things that come up. And here's the thing about parenting is you actually can't predict all of them. You can't. You are going to face things potentially as parents that you have no idea. You've never even heard of it. Case in point, we had our firstborn, and honestly, other than her birth just being an unexpected, terrible situation I was in, and then giving up on nursing her and just going through shame and guilt and judgment of others. And yeah, I've talked about all of this as well. Other than that, she was so easy. Oh my gosh, it's why we were pregnant when she was 10 months old with our secondborn. I'm telling you, so easy. And foolishly, We went into having our second born with, we're amazing. This is going to be easy. We have an idea of what we're doing, at least at those beginning stages. Well, that sweet girl turned 1 and all hell broke loose for us as parents. What we didn't know and what we were living through was a child having a chemical reaction to red 40 food dye. If you're not familiar, you guys can do a Google search and you'll probably actually find more information than I could, because this was 2007 when I was looking this up. And if you used Google, was there Google? I'm sure Google was around in 2007. You just couldn't find information on the internet like you can find it in 2020. So we were at a loss. We actually didn't know what was going on. And if it wasn't for a dear friend from an email that I reached out at just the lowest point in my life, I felt like at the time, she saved me. She saved me from probably losing my mind and sitting at a pediatrician's office just crying my eyes out because no one could figure out what was wrong with my kid. Well, she was having this chemical reaction to red 40. We were dealing with things as parents that no one could tell us about. When you have your teeny tiny, and she was so tiny, this girl was running at 10 months old. I'm not joking. I have video footage of this child at 10 months old running. No one can tell you how to deal with 2-hour-long screaming fits every single night. There is no parenting book that addresses a chemical reaction to red 40. If anyone wants to write one, though, please do. We were at a loss as parents. So you can imagine this invoked some disagreements on how to handle it because we didn't even know what was happening for so long. We were raised in homes where, we got spanked when we did something wrong. Like, it was common. I hold no judgment. I mean, I'm not going to get into spanking here, though that's obviously a place you can highly disagree, but we didn't disagree on that. Now, what happened, though, was we had to take a completely different approach with our second born, and it brought up all this tension. It brought up so many disagreements on what was best to do because neither one of us knew what was best to do. We were both losing our minds. Here's what we learned of when you disagree is not to get into it in the moment. When you're both upset, when something has triggered all these thoughts, all these emotions, that is not the time to deal with it. And your girl Jen didn't figure that out quick enough. I would second guess or question or judge or throw something out to my husband in those moments, which we weren't even dealing with what was going on with the child, which, of course, there were other things that would come up. I'm just using this one example of our second born. There were things that would come up and I would just lose my crap. I mean, full on lose my crap. And I'm upset about what's going on and not knowing, and I'm just yelling to yell at that point. I'm disagreeing with how David's handling something, and do you know what that did? It hurt him. It made him feel that he didn't even know what was best for his own child. In the moment, when you disagree on what's happening, this is that great place where when I talked about arguing, you take a pause. Like, we need to just pause right here and have a discussion. That has worked so much better. Or, if possible, if no one's in harm's way, if you have the ability to say, let it be what it is, and then let's talk about it later, when emotions have calmed down, when you're not at this heightened place, and you sit down and say, hey, so when that happens again, because the way kids work, things inevitably happen again and again. When that happens again, can we talk about how to handle that? Because I actually wouldn't have handled it the way you did. So I'd like to talk about a better way to handle it or something we can agree on, a middle ground. So my first advice, if you will, or observation of how to handle things when you disagree on parenting is don't deal with it when emotions are high and right in the moment. And this could come from either spouse, but I'm telling you, it was me questioning. I really was. Like, you don't know what you're doing, David. You can't figure this out. You know, you're not a college educated human being who knows what he's doing. Nope. I mean, it was awful. It was awful. It was not the time. And it actually took me way longer than it should have to figure out, like, you're making this worse. I would question him because, of course, I'm with the kids all the time. He knew that. He respected that. I was with them all the time, so I just assumed I knew better. I know better. I know them. I'm with them. I can figure this out. Except I was missing out on actually the perspective I needed was someone who was not there all the time looking at the situation. He brought in the other perspective, and it wasn't until I was like, wow, I actually need to see this from a totally different perspective that I shut my mouth. I I had to shut up. That's a lesson I've had to learn the hard way a lot. You've probably figured that out by now. But I did have to figure out that if I wanted a happy marriage, on top of parenting our kids in the best way, if I wanted that happy marriage, though, if I wanted to be friends with this human for the long term, I had to stop doing what I was doing. I had to stop questioning everything he was doing as a parent. And I say everything, that sounds really, really dramatic. It wasn't everything, but it was enough that he felt it. That it was actually something like a wedge coming between us. So, something that actually helped navigate parenting better was this idea we adopted, and we just called it a proactive parenting plan. We sat down one day when I would say our oldest, who's 15 and a half now, she was probably around the age of 3. We sat down and I said, let's just talk about some big things that are coming, like big milestones, if you will, or things, decisions we're going to have to make. And let's just talk about them now before they ever get here. So it was proactive. A lot of what we experienced from the kids' point of view in the two of us growing up was that our parents were more reactive. And we just wanted to bring in something different. And it's not that having a proactive parenting plan has taken away the reactiveness. It's just reduced it, and it's also opened up things for conversation with each other. And actually, as our kids have gotten older, they know about the proactive parenting plan, and it's brought about really good conversations with them because now they want to give input into it. This is a great time to mention episode 26 if you've never listened to it. It's called Keep Your Plans in Pencil. This proactive parenting plan, quite literally, was written in pencil. We even knew when our kids were 3 that you just can't predict everything. There's no way to know. And if our second born with red 40 chemical reaction taught us anything, is you can't predict what's going to happen. So the proactive parenting plan we came up with was in pencil. Now, some things that were on this proactive parenting plan, it was stuff like dating. Like, when are we okay with our daughter dating? Makeup. When are we okay saying, yep, you can wear makeup? Social media, having a cell phone, curfews. That's just to name a few things that are on the plan. So we sat down and decided, all right, in pencil, what do we feel comfortable with? What do we think is an appropriate milestone age for her to have this? Now, at the time, okay, so we have a 3-year-old and we did have our second born. We had no idea we'd be ever so blessed with 4 daughters. So we really didn't need to modify the things we put in there because it's all girls. We didn't add anything in for boys because we didn't get any boys. However, we have come back to that plan again and again. And then as our daughters got older and they would ask questions like, when can I wear makeup? We said 15. Like, for your 15th birthday, I'll take you out and make sure we do the whole kit and caboodle. I mean, everything. And my oldest can tell you that's exactly what we did. I took her out. I mean, she got everything she'd ever want, made sure she got the right kind of foundation, because unlike her own mother, who I had the line, you guys know the jaw line. I mean, if you were buying CoverGirl makeup at the CVS pharmacy, you know what I'm talking about. I didn't want her to go through any of that. I wanted her to have all of the right things and know how to use them. And gosh, I probably would have had all of that if I had YouTube as well. But they know the age they can date. They know the age that they can get a cell phone. They know the age they're allowed to go on social media. Hint, hint, we haven't hit that in our house yet. However, this plan, the whole point of this plan, the proactive parenting plan in pencil, was for David and I to have discussions to reduce disagreements later. We actually had the, I don't know, disagreements, if you will, but I guess they really weren't, because it was proactive. We weren't even addressing when she was 3. It wasn't an issue about dating. We weren't thinking, like, oh my gosh, our 3-year-old dating. No, because it was so far out. But we could have the discussion then instead of the disagreement in the moment. I have to say, again, I'm so grateful that I understood the pencil principle even back then, because some things have had to change. And what's so great is we had those discussions. So as new milestones are approaching, we can sit down and have a discussion about that, because inevitably our kids are a factor now. When you have teenagers, they're factoring into, hey, so I think it was our oldest, had an entire, I think it was 10-point outline of why she wanted a cell phone. And it was before we were really comfortable with her having a cell phone. Um, and we actually brought that into a discussion between the two of us, because it was different than our plan. She had amazing points. And we found a middle ground between actually the 3 of us that we were comfortable with. Having this plan has greatly reduced our disagreements. And it's not that we never disagree. If you never disagree on parenting stuff with your partner in crime, parenting other humans, are you even talking about what's going on with your kids? I mean, inevitably, I think those disagreements are going to happen. You're 2 different people who had 2 different childhoods yourself, 2 different sets of parents. Or, David was raised by a single mom and his grandparents were part of that equation. I was raised by, high school sweetheart, still married to this day. Very different homes. So those factor into what we bring into our parenting. It's inevitable. We don't fight it. We just know now we need to have these discussions before the thing arises. We can't get into it in the moment. We end up in that having to use the 6 rules of arguing. We have to go back there because we end up in an argument. We end up disagreeing, which ends up causing this tension. And we actually would just rather not have that. And we'd rather not have that in front of the kids. We'd rather not have that become this divisive thing, this wedge between the 2 of us. So we bring it into a discussion rather than a disagreement. Because remember, when you show up for a discussion, we're trying to find middle ground. We're trying to find a compromise. And if you go back to the rules of arguing, it's not about winning. It's not about I win. I will present my case. I will explain where I'm coming from. I do have the girl factor, the female factor that I bring into it. And what's great is I know now I need to have the male perspective. I need to have someone who's not a girl bring in that perspective, because I don't think about things that he thinks about. So we end up having a discussion more than we have a disagreement. If you have kids and you've not sat down and really just even had this discussion or made this proactive parenting plan, it's never too late. You're like, "Mom, my kids are older." That's okay. What's coming up for them? What are some things that you want to put in pencil? Like if this comes up in conversation, maybe it is dating. Maybe it's how far away they go to college, that you actually want to have a discussion about that. So when your kid comes up to you and says, I want to move across the country to go to school, you're not like one of you's hell yes, the other one's hell no, and you end up in a fight. That's not good. Have that discussion then. That's actually not on our proactive plan. I actually think we probably need to discuss that, though we're really supportive of our kids going away to school because we have no leg to stand on. We both moved far away from home, so who are we to tell our kids they can't go? I'll just cry in the closet before I record a podcast episode if that's what they decide. So you can make this plan and you can even utilize that pause. If you're seeing those emotions come in, step away from it. Don't react in the moment. If everyone's safe, one parenting decision being made that you're not in 100% agreement with is not the end of the world. I assure you. I look back on those things that I thought were huge and they just were not. I hope this was helpful. I hope that this invokes more conversation within your relationship. We have one more part in this series, and I'm probably the most excited to talk about it because it's date night. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about the real reason we have date nights. I hope you're excited for it. Next week, we'll dive in.